I drove 10 hours from Boston to Bramble Creek, Indiana, with a trunk full of wrapped gifts and a head full of reasons not to turn back. The house looked smaller than I remembered. Faded shutters. The garden my mother once loved, now reduced to mulch and weeds. Still, I stepped onto the porch with a practiced smile. When the door opened, my father filled the frame. Frank Whitmore. 6 feet of sun-weathered pride and silence. His arms were crossed before I could say his name. He looked at me like I was a neighbor who wandered up the wrong driveway. Then, with the same voice that once told bedtime stories and laid down curfews, he said, "We don't have a daughter. Please leave." Behind him stood my brother Tyler. He wasn't surprised. In fact, he looked entertained, half a smirk curling on his face. Dangling from his fingers was a worn keychain, a small purple sunflower charm I'd received for my 16th birthday. My bedroom key used to hang from it. Apparently, it still did. I waited for anyone to say this was a mistake. But no one moved. No one blinked. Not even my mother. I hadn't seen her yet. And suddenly, that absence hurt more than the words. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just stepped back, one foot catching on the edge of the porch step. The gift bags in my hands trembled, but I didn't let them fall. Not yet. What do you do when the home you saved no longer knows your name? There's a picture of our family that used to hang above the mantel. My father in the middle, stiff and straight in his Sunday flannel. My mother seated next to him, hands folded neatly in her lap. Tyler and I on either side like matching bookends. I always smiled a little too hard. He never smiled at all. Everyone who visited said we looked like a postcard. What they didn't know was how carefully the angles were chosen, how often we were told to stand still and not ruin it. Frank Whitmore ran our household the same way he ran his construction crews. No excuses, no emotions, and definitely no deviation. He believed in order and sweat in sons who built and daughters who obeyed. He praised Tyler for breathing. Literally. At the dinner table, my brother could burp out a sentence and still get a laugh. When I brought home straight A's, Dad would glance at my report card like it was a grocery receipt. Good, he'd say, already turning back to his meatloaf. Tyler struggled in school, but he knew how to play Dad like a fiddle. He asked for advice he didn't need, mimicked opinions like a mirror, tilted his head just enough to look vulnerable. By 15, he was a master of the performance. Mom, Evelyn, was the soft one. Her hands always smelled like lavender lotion and bread dough. She tucked notes into my lunchbox. She waited up when I stayed late at the library. Once, when I was 13, I overheard her arguing with Dad behind the laundry room door. "Claire deserves better than silence," she said. "She's not asking for permission, just recognition." He didn't shout, just closed the washing machine lid and walked out. She followed quiet again. That was the last time I remember her raising her voice. I used to think if I achieved enough, I'd earn his approval. That maybe one day he'd see me the way he saw Tyler, with pride, or at least ease. But with every competition I won, every scholarship I applied for, the gap only widened. Dad started calling my ambitions fancy nonsense. He said I was chasing things that didn't matter. "You'll get married anyway," he told me once, wiping grease off his hands. "No man wants a wife who talks numbers." So I stopped showing him. Started hiding things that mattered to me. By the time I got accepted into Boston University on a full scholarship, I had already forged his signature on the acceptance form. He never found out, or if he did, he never mentioned it. He just nodded when I left and said, "Don't expect help when it falls apart." I was 17, and already used to being invisible in a house where I used to live. Boston didn't welcome me with open arms, but it didn't question why I left either. The city had its own rhythm, sharp, fast, and unforgiving. I matched it. Classes by day, waitressing by night. Student loans, part-time jobs, scholarships, and no room for breakdowns. I got used to ramen in paper cups, to silence on holidays, to waking up before sunrise and going to sleep with lecture notes in my hand. I called home. Sometimes my mother answered in whispers. Sometimes not at all. Tyler never picked up. My father never tried. By 23, I had graduated with honors. By 25, I was managing investment portfolios bigger than my father's company had ever dreamed of. And at 26, I signed the lease to a one-bedroom apartment with a view of the Charles River and a fridge I stocked with things no one else chose for me. There was pride in that. Quiet maybe, but real. Then, on a Tuesday in late autumn, my phone rang. It was my mother. Her voice cracked before she said hello. "The bank is taking the house, Claire." I stood frozen in my office, a spreadsheet open, untouched. She spoke in pieces, missed payments, a lost contract, Frank refusing to admit anything was wrong. They were 2 months away from foreclosure. "He won't listen," she whispered. "I don't know what to do." She wasn't asking for money. She never did. But she was asking for me. That night, I didn't sleep. I ran numbers instead, my savings, my bonuses, my stock options. The next morning, I called a lawyer and created Blue Fern Holdings LLC. 2 weeks later, I bought the house I grew up in. But not in my name. Through Blue Fern, I became the legal owner, an invisible one. I paid the overdue mortgage in full. I arranged with the bank to issue a fake letter, something about special refinancing terms due to long-standing payment history. It was my mother's idea. "He can't know you helped," she said. His pride wouldn't survive it. Please, I agreed. Not because I respected his pride, but because I respected her peace. She called me 2 days after the papers went through. "He's relieved," she said. "He thinks the bank recognized his integrity." I didn't laugh. I didn't say a word. After that, the payments became just another line in my monthly budget. The house I had once fought so hard to escape now sat on my balance sheet like a dormant memory. Tyler moved back in a few months later after another failed startup. He took over the basement. Mom said he called it his home office. I asked if she was okay. She changed the subject. She always changed the subject. Every now and then, I'd mail her birthday cards. A small gift. A photograph from Boston. No reply ever came. Sometimes I wondered if she even got them, but I kept sending them, because that house still held the smell of cinnamon and old photos. And some part of me still believed that one day she'd find them all and remember who paid to keep the lights on. 2 years passed. I didn't call anymore. I didn't stop caring. But caring had begun to feel like pressing against a door that would never open. Then, one evening just before Thanksgiving, my phone buzzed. It was a text from my mother. "Claire, please come home this year. I miss you. We need to be a family again." 11 words. Not a phone call. Not a follow-up. Just that. No punctuation after again. I stared at the screen for a long time. The last time I'd gotten a message from her, it was a forwarded recipe. No greeting. No sign-off. Just, "Thought you might like this." I showed the text to my neighbor Jessica, the only friend who'd stayed through every season of my silence. "Do you think she means it?" I asked. "I think she's trying," Jessica said softly. Trying doesn't always look how we want it to. So I said yes, quietly, only to myself. I requested the week off work. I wrapped 3 gifts, a leather wallet for Dad stamped with his initials, a set of hand tools for Mom's garden, even if she hadn't touched it in years, a silver watch for Tyler more than he deserved, but still. I packed carefully, nothing flashy, no big city label, a burgundy sweater, plain black pants, flats that wouldn't scuff the porch. I wasn't going to make a statement. I was just coming home, or trying to. The drive from Boston to Bramble Creek was 10 hours. I knew every bend, every highway diner billboard. The closer I got, the more the landscape changed, glass towers giving way to gas stations and silos. Late autumn had painted the trees in fire. Orange and gold leaves drifted down like memories that hadn't settled. I passed Mrs. Ellsworth's porch with the same giant turkey cutout she'd used since I was 9. And then I turned onto Sycamore Lane, the street where my name had once belonged. I slowed the car in front of the house. It looked different. Or maybe I did. The shutters were darker, the lawn patchier. A satellite dish now clung to the side like a parasite. I reached for the gift bags, steadying my hands. Was I coming home, or just arriving at the place where I used to live? The front steps creaked under my shoes. I paused at the welcome mat, a new one. Stark, generic, and black. No more painted sunflowers. Just the Whitmore family in rigid block letters. I rang the doorbell. The old chime used to echo soft and slow. This one buzzed like a hotel check-in counter. Heavy footsteps approached. I knew the rhythm before I saw the man, The door opened. My father stood there in a plaid shirt, his expression unreadable. His hair was fully gray now. His eyes, the same color as mine, were colder than I remembered. "Dad," I began. "It's me." He didn't blink, didn't ask why I came, didn't even step aside. "We don't have a daughter," he said flatly. "Please leave." I thought I'd misheard. Maybe the wind had twisted his words. "What?" Behind him, Tyler leaned in from the hallway, still broad-shouldered, still shorter than Dad. He smiled, not warmly, but the way someone smiles when they've won a game you didn't know you were playing. Between his fingers, he twirled my old keychain, the purple sunflower one. It dangled like a trophy. "Sorry you came all this way," he said. "We've moved on. Family's tighter now. Smaller but better." I searched behind them for movement, for my mother's voice, her footsteps. A breath. Nothing. "Where's Mom?" I asked, voice low. "Not your concern anymore," my father answered. I looked past him. The hallway was dim, but I could see enough. The wall of family photos had gaps, spaces where frames once hung. Every picture of me, gone. And beyond that, my old bedroom door. Open. No longer blue. It had been painted a hard, dark green. Inside, I could make out gym equipment, a weight bench, a gaming chair. No bed, no books. No trace of 16-year-old me, like what I did with the place Tyler asked. Needed space for my business stuff. Dad helped me convert it last year. So they had been planning this, not just the erasure, the replacement. I could have yelled, demanded answers, but I didn't. Instead, I looked at the keychain in his hand, the one I hadn't seen in over a decade. That was the year Mom had given it to me. She called it my keep going charm. Funny how it ended up in the hands of the one person who always wanted me gone. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't even anger. It was a decision, made, final, delivered like a verdict, and they were waiting for me to hear it. I don't remember stepping inside. Maybe it was my father who moved aside, or maybe I moved through him like a ghost. Either way, the door clicked shut behind me, and I found myself standing in a place that smelled like strangers. Gone was the lemon polish, the faint trace of cinnamon. Now it smelled of old pizza boxes and protein powder. The living room had been rearranged. The rose-patterned pillows were gone. A massive, flat-screen TV hung where Mom's framed cross-stitch used to be. And everywhere Tyler. His trophies. His equipment. His mark. I turned slowly toward the hallway where sunlight used to spill across the carpet in the afternoons. Now it just felt dim, stale, and quiet. "Where's Mom?" I asked more to the house than anyone in it. No answer came. Not from my father. Not from Tyler, who loitered nearby with the swagger of someone who believed they had won. I moved toward the wall where our family photos once hung. The arrangement was familiar but fractured, like a smile missing teeth. Gaps stood where my face used to be. The dust outlines still clung to the wallpaper. It wasn't just a mistake. They had removed me. I heard a drawer open behind me. Footsteps. Then her voice softer, smaller than I remembered. "I didn't agree to any of this," my mother said. She stepped into view, holding a stack of envelopes bound by a rubber band. They looked worn, some torn at the edges. My handwriting stared back at me from each one. "I found these in Tyler's room," she whispered. "I thought you'd stopped writing." I took them from her numb. They were the birthday cards, the letters, the photos from Boston, mail I had sent over the last 2 years, never knowing it never reached her. I looked up at Tyler. His face showed no apology, just a shrug. "You walked away first," he said under his breath. But I hadn't. I'd called, texted. I'd shown up with gifts and hope and enough history to fill a moving truck. I just hadn't been heard. "You told them I gave up," I said quietly. "That I didn't care." My mother looked at him, then at me, and something shifted in her eyes. Something like shame, or maybe recognition. I couldn't tell. And still my father hadn't spoken. 3 years ago I said to him, "You almost lost this house." He blinked, uncertain. His hands had begun to tremble slightly where they rested on the back of the chair. "Mom called me. You were 60 days from foreclosure." He shook his head. That's not... The bank didn't cut a deal because of your record, I interrupted. That was me. I bought the house. Through a holding company. I've been making the payments. The silence that followed was heavy, dense like fog before a storm. He sat down without a word. I stepped toward the side cabinet and opened the drawer where I knew he kept documents. The folder was there. I flipped through until I found it the title paperwork. Only, it wasn't what I'd signed. The buyer's name had been altered. So had the terms. My stomach dropped. These aren't the originals I said aloud, mostly to myself. They've been forged. I turned toward Tyler. He froze, lips pressed into a line that had nowhere left to go. You were going to sell it, I said. You forged the transfer documents. You were going to sell the house. My mother's breath caught. My father looked up sharply. Tyler didn't deny it. Not really. I had debts, he muttered. Big ones. No one asked how much. The silence said we already knew. 80,000. Maybe more. Crypto, gambling, another failed business. Another hole to dig out of with someone else's shovel. I looked at the house at what it had become. Not a home, but a mask. A hollow stage for loyalty that had never gone both ways. And I realized I hadn't just been forgotten. I had been erased so someone else could write themselves into the center. No one moved. The accusations had been laid bare. Not shouted. Just said plainly like weather reports. Ethan's silence deepened into something that looked suspiciously like fear. My father sat in his chair, his hands resting on his knees like he was holding himself down. My mother paced once, just one step forward, one back, then stopped as if afraid she might disappear if she moved too far. No one tried to deny what I had said. I let the quiet stretch. It didn't feel empty. It felt earned. I'm not calling the police, I said finally. That made Tyler glance up. Yet. He looked away. But things changed today. I walked over to the small desk in the corner, Mom's old writing table, now cluttered with unopened mail and fast food receipts, and set the forged documents down carefully. Like evidence. Because that's what they were. Tyler will leave. Tonight. No one argued. He will enter a program. Any attempt to contact me for money for shortcuts for excuses ends here. I turned to my father. You and Mom can stay in this house. But we're doing this legally. There will be a lease. $1 a month. That's not rent. It's clarity. He didn't meet my eyes, but I saw his jaw shift. A small nod followed tight and reluctant. I'm not punishing anyone, I added. I'm just done being erased. That was the only line that needed to land. Tyler said nothing. He stood slowly like a man walking away from the scene of his own accident. He paused at the hallway, glanced at Mom, then at Dad. Neither reached for him, and then he looked at me. For the first time that day, his voice cracked. Where am I supposed to go? I didn't raise my voice. You'll figure it out. That was the grace I had left to give. He disappeared down the hall. A door slammed. A duffel bag was packed in silence. I turned to my mother, who looked exhausted, like every quiet choice she'd made over the years was suddenly asking for explanation. She opened her mouth to speak, then closed it. Her eyes filled, but she didn't cry. Instead, she stepped closer and took my hand. Will you stay the night? There was something tentative in the question, not just invitation, but permission-seeking, as if I had become the one deciding what was allowed. I looked around the room. The couch had been replaced. The rug was newer, but in the far corner above the heater vent, a small hook still held a single nail. Once my baby picture had hung there. Now it was empty. Yes, I said, but tomorrow we change things. She nodded, slowly, then squeezed my hand once before letting go. And in that house, filled with rearranged furniture and stolen letters, I finally sat down this time, by choice, not invitation. The next morning smelled like coffee and something burnt. Mom hadn't cooked in a while, but she tried. We sat around the kitchen table, just the three of us eating eggs that tasted like rubber and toast that could have doubled as cardboard. No one complained. The chairs were the same. So was the light fixture, still slightly tilted from that one winter storm years ago. But the way we sat had changed, like the air between us had shifted just enough to be noticed. My father passed me the butter without speaking. My mother poured coffee like it was a question. We didn't talk about Tyler. We didn't talk about the keychain, though I found it later that afternoon, resting quietly on the guest bed where my overnight bag sat. No note, no apology. Just the small purple sunflower looking up at me like it remembered everything. I placed it in my coat pocket. Not to carry, just to know where it was. Before I left, I stopped in the living room. That empty nail above the heater still waited quiet and a little rusty. I didn't say anything. Didn't ask for the picture to be put back. But I looked at it, long enough for both of them to follow my gaze. Mom reached for my hand. Dad stood behind her, saying nothing. "We'll fix it," she whispered. I didn't answer. Sometimes silence is the most honest reply. Then I picked up my coat, tucked the keychain deeper into my pocket, and stepped out into a morning that felt colder than it looked. The door closed behind me soft, but not locked.